Seattle hockey fans, I have to say something, and you might not like it. Heck, I don't even like it. But here we go. I'm going to tell you the truth. Jessica Campbell should not be the next head coach of the Seattle Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a new week here in the beautiful month of May, Seattle hockey fans, and I appreciate you joining us on the Locked On Kraken show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, been with you since the very beginning, and I can also be found these days talking on CBS Sports about women's basketball, sometimes a little ice hockey. I've got another special assignment coming up for CBS later in the month, but always a joy to be here, hop on the microphone. I will say, though, I'm not going to enjoy having to break down this first segment. I said what I said, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Before we get into that, today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Oh, okay. Deep breath here. Jessica Campbell should not be the next head coach of the Seattle Kraken. And I'm going to lay out 3 reasons why. The first reason is she could benefit from more NHL experience. She's been in the NHL as an assistant coach for only 1 season. It wasn't a particularly successful season when we look at wins, losses, and overall team metrics. I will give it to you. I do think that Maddie Beniers, Shane Wright, we will see the fruit of the labor put in this past season in the coming years. I already think 2025, year of Beniers, we got that from Jessica Campbell in our exclusive interview in January when I was there for the PWHL Takeover Tour. I spoke to her again, as a lot of our insiders know. You heard that full conversation with Jessica Campbell, and she talked about what she's still learning. That was our first question. That's what we talked about off of the hop. And if you want to be a member of our Locked On Insiders community, check the show notes. You can text or go to subtext. There's a direct link there to become part of our insider community. She needs a little more time, and that's not a knock. I will not speak for Jessica. I will say, from having spoken to her, from knowing the respect that she has for the game, the work that she's put in, that I think she could be honest in assessing if a head coaching job were to open tomorrow, if she would feel that she would be a strong candidate for that position. There are just sometimes some things that you have to go through. And the reason I have difficulty saying this out loud is because we live in a society where there is often a double standard for women, and women are expected to be, they have to be almost flawless to even get an opportunity. And I know all of that. And I know that that exists. I also know there are other people, overwhelmingly men, not only men, but overwhelmingly men, who are given positions to be a head coach in across sports, perhaps earlier than, or with less experience than maybe what most people would consider is necessary for the job, maybe more or less experience than we've seen other people have before their first head coaching role. And I will say that, putting aside how gender and gender bias might impact those decisions, I do think that there are times where going case by case is important. So if you want to make an argument, maybe this is Jessica Campbell a case by case. Okay, I would still push back because I think if we see on the positive what Jessica Campbell was able to do, the player development, we know that she comes from that world. She knows the game very well. I don't get the sense that she had difficulty getting the team to buy in and to respect what she was asking them to do. What I will say is, and we've said this on this podcast before when talking about Jessica Campbell in the AHL, there are areas for improvement. Special teams, coordinating special teams, I believe to be one of them. Now, I guess you could counter that by saying, oh, well, a head coach will have different assistants and, they can build up a staff that will be able to either accentuate their strong suits or to perhaps take on things that a head coach feels that if they had a specific content, so to speak, expert, that the team, then the head coach can focus on what they need to do. No, I mean, no. I was listening to, I have a friend of mine who was at Elon at the same time as me and has now gone on to become a very well respected chef. And what that person was talking about was that they had opportunities to take on, and I don't know the full kind of hierarchy of chefs, but I know like head chef and sous chef are pretty high up there. But what I didn't realize is that there are a lot more managerial roles even as a sous chef, at least if I understood this interview correct. And what my friend was saying is that they turned down sous chef, positions because they didn't know every aspect the of the line, so to speak, yet. They didn't know every station. They didn't have the proficiency to do everything. And we live in a world where I do think that we've accelerated that process of learning every piece. I worked in a restaurant. I was not at a fancy restaurant, but even at what was considered fast food but dine in, I was a manager. I wanted to be a training manager. I wanted to work with staff. I didn't really care much about the food, but I wanted to work with staff. I wanted to help them as they were getting onboarded. I love leadership development. Oh, geez, you know that about me. What I needed to learn and what that restaurant had me do was learn every managerial position before they would consider me to be a training manager, even though my proficiency, my expertise was squarely in training management or professional development. I think in that case, things, I didn't quite make it to the training manager level, but that's another story for another day. But I respect that path. I think maybe there's a balance, but I respect that path. And I want that level of assuredness for Jessica Campbell. That leads me to the second point. And I feel like we're a community here, so I'm going to speak matter of factly, and I'll give my opinions later. Making a move like this, putting another young head coach in a position to take the reins of this team, I don't like it. I've said before that I don't think that the vision is completely clear. We have a new general manager now. Ron Francis moving into a new role for the organization as president. And again, it's that as soon as possible that we're hearing from Sam Holloway and Todd Lywicki, but then we're hearing we're going to develop young players. We're going to, from Jason Botterill. Putting a young coach in a position putting a coach with limited, maybe fruitful, but limited experience in the NHL in a situation where an organization is not completely on solid ground. And it could, maybe this changes by the season, right? But I've said this before. I said this a few episodes ago. If things don't go well, if this organization doesn't align much better than they have been the prior 4 seasons, are we putting the next head coach, Jessica Campbell or whomever else, in a position where if they do not perform, if they do not get this team to the playoffs, then they are gone? It feels that way to me. And I think it would be a waste of a talent to, out of convenience, out of mindfulness of the storylines, out of I, out of I mean, I already said convenience, but I almost want to say feeling like you have to make a move, feeling rushed into a move. I think that would be a disservice to all parties involved. What do I mean by that? It's a disservice to the organization as a whole. It's a disservice to Jessica Campbell. It's a disservice to your roster, who presumably you will have players that have gone from Dave Haxtell to Dan Bylsma to, in this case, right, in this hypothetical, Jessica Campbell in 5 seasons, and now have to get ready for a new head coach. Why? And I've said this, right? Why would anyone, without being sure they understand and trust the vision of this organization, especially someone who's looking for a leg up, for their big chance, for their opportunity? I just don't think that this organization is aligned enough to make a decision to hire a very new NHL coach and to have the patience perhaps required to let them do the job, because there'd be some learning on the fly, I would imagine, if someone with Jessica Campbell's experience or less is coming in. Now, does that mean that I am a proponent of recycling the same, 20 some odd names for head coach? Or, I mean, there's literally 32 teams, but no, I'm not a proponent for cycling around the same names. I don't think ageism, whether someone's too young or quote unquote too old, should ever be a factor. I think you have to go off of the performance. And, it's just like hockey players, right? It's like filling out your roster. And we'll kind of get to this a little bit later. All right, Seattle hockey fans, today's episode once again brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Listen, have you ever taken a look at your bank account and been like, where did all my money go? That was me. Well, that was me before I got Monarch Money. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's completely easy to lose track of your finances. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I love looking at the dashboards. They're simple, they're intuitive. It's super easy for me to attach the accounts that I want to Monarch Money so that I can use those dashboards and accounts to keep up. For me, what that looks like is I use all of my business expenses, and I've been able to keep my personal expenses separate by making sure I link just the accounts that I want to track on Monarch Money. So that gives me a more complete snapshot than maybe I'd get from my bank account or some of the other apps that I personally have used. So I highly recommend Monarch Money. I've had a great time using it so far. And I want you to take control of your finances using Monarch Money. You can use the code locked on NHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code locked on NHL for half off your first year. Just because you can hire someone with limited experience doesn't mean it's always going to work out, right? Just because you draft a young rookie doesn't always mean that their direct path is top six in the NHL in by the fall of the same year that they were drafted. Those are exceptions, not the rule. My third rationale here, and this is where I might just kind of get on my soapbox. Explain to me how the protege, right, of Dan Bylsma is going to give the organization what Dan Bylsma couldn't give the organization. So this one is a little bit more, it's not specifically about Jessica. I kind of focused on Jessica, then I focused on the organization, and now I do want to focus on Dan Bylsma. I've said before, I don't think it's any surprise to people who listen to the show every day or who tune in as OGers or, see me on social media. I did not like how things went down with Dan Bylsma. I still think there's some power struggle that I haven't quite cracked the code to yet. If Bylsma, who has NHL experience, who has come in as a first-time coach and gotten all the way there, if he wasn't good enough, why? And I'm not saying there isn't a good answer, but in this scenario, I would really like to hear if indeed Jessica Campbell does get the position, which I don't think she will, mostly for the first reason that I gave. What would make you think that things would be different with someone whose AHL and NHL experience has been so closely molded by Dan Bylsma? What makes you think that she's going to be different enough for what the vision of the organization is? And for me, now this is where I'm giving you my opinion. The third point is very much so opinion. The others I tried to keep at least anchored. I think it goes back to power struggle. I'm trying to pick my words carefully here. When you're a young person on the come up, when you're given an opportunity that you feel like could be life-changing, there is sometimes a propensity or an expectation. I want to underline that. There is either the desire to or the expectation that you will be loyal to the organization that gave you this once in a lifetime, pinch me, dream come true, I'm going to Disney World kind of moment. There's sometimes a desire to or the expectation that you will be loyal. No questions asked. That maybe people will be put around you that are given autonomy to make certain decisions that in another situation, if you were a head coach, would not be their decision to make. These are all hypotheticals, right? I have no information that says that Jessica Campbell will be considered, that she is interested, that she will be named the next head coach. But because I do think that she would benefit from more experience, because I don't think that this Seattle Kraken team is quite aligned yet, and they've been doing work. They, we haven't heard any updates, so there could be things that we don't know. But from the last press conference, I still think there's some things that need to fall into realignment. And I don't know how she will be different than what you just let go of, except that she's a younger head coach with less NHL experience. That's not a flaw. It's a fact. These are not things that I'm saying to be mean to Jessica. I definitely do not think anyone who's listened to me speak for 5 minutes on anything thinks that this is, somehow me trying to suppress or oppress women in hockey. I freaking love talking to Jessica Campbell about hockey. I love getting to hear her talk about the players. She knows these guys so well. She has a vision for what she wants from if again, insiders, you heard it. I also played it on the regular podcast. She broke down, and these are things that I've been talking about on the show. Shane Wright, it's more of a mental thing. It's the confidence, but physically, I told you I was at training camp. This dude came in cut. He was ready to go from a physical standpoint, and it was the mental side of the game that he needed. Spoke with Jessica Campbell, said this on the show. Matty Beniers got thrown into the fire, but what did he have that Shane Wright didn't? He had college experience. He had Olympic experience. So he's used to, in a way that Shane wasn't, playing with older, stronger guys. Matty had that experience. And so I'm sure it was uncomfortable for him at times, but that wasn't the mental side of the game wasn't where he needed the most work. He needed to focus on his physicality, focus on his skating, which we heard from Jessica Campbell when I talked to her at the top of the month. All of these things, if we say Jessica Campbell eventually the head coach, I would sign me up. What does that look like? Is it another year? Is it another 2 years? Is it another 3 years? I don't know. And maybe having these conversations, I don't know, maybe the Seattle Kraken are sitting down with her saying, hey, is this somewhere where you want to see yourself? Let's draw out a roadmap, because we've been told they will retain her. Again, if you're part of our insiders program, you got to hear her kind of talk about that, or kind of not talk about that really. And you heard in her words and how that exchange went. I would be down for that. They absolutely, and I've said this before, right? I've said this before on the show. They should absolutely retain Jessica Campbell. I hope they're having a conversation, sitting down, what are the goals? What is a possible here? I would love that. But to say she should be the next head coach of the Seattle Kraken is just, I know enough about society to know that the potential for derailment, the potential for making the path even more difficult for Campbell moving forward is higher if it is perceived that she was given a role before she was ready. And we've never had an NHL assistant. We've never had an NHL head coach. So I can't base this on what the NHL would do. But I've been a woman my whole life. Well, I've been a female my whole life, a woman for about half of my life, right? What I do know is that coaching carousel that I was talking about earlier, despite qualifications, despite experience, despite even success in different sports that I cover in society, if a woman who is maybe even, dare I say, overqualified at the time that she is being considered, or I don't know, let's say running for a particular position, if that person does not get the role, whether they air quotes should or should not have, it is very hard for them to be considered the next time around. I also know from being a female my whole life, a girl and then a woman, um, that there are things that happen during that, I don't know, let's say election or consideration for a particular role that can be extremely hard to hear. Um, People are cruel. People are misinformed. People are perpetuating sexism in the things that they say, whether they mean them, whether they're saying them just to, get clicks and follows. But the impact, whether it was meant as a joke or not, the impact for someone having to relive and reaccount things that they've likely heard their whole life growing up, that is a large toll. And it is not something that most men, especially the demographic of men in hockey, that they have to deal with. So yes, there is a part of my soul that is perhaps protective of Jessica Campbell, and I will acknowledge that. And that is why I saved that part of my argument for last. But at the end of the day, I'll say it this way. It would be unprecedented for Jessica Campbell to be a head coach in the NHL, period, point blank. She already made history. But I also believe it would be an unprecedented move for someone so early in their professional hockey career to be given this role. I could be wrong, and please let me know if there is a head coach that was promoted within the first 3 years of them working in professional hockey, and I'm talking AHL and above, then let me know, because from what I know, I will say it this way, from what I know, this would be unprecedented, but I don't know everything. So please let me know in the comments. And I would love to learn about that particular coach and what that trajectory looks like. It's not impossible. I do think it's very unlikely, and it wouldn't be the choice that I made because of the 3 reasons I gave you, and perhaps underlining the fact that I'm not sure how a protege of Dan Bylsma would be any different than Dan Bylsma, who obviously was not good enough for this front office. So I'm sorry I had to say it out loud, but I told you I will be warm and truthful on this podcast. And I think that that's the truth of it. Yes, Jessica Campbell, if Jessica Campbell wants to be a head coach in the NHL, I will root for that. There's power. There's power in believing that you can learn more. And it's a fine line because you don't want to miss an opportunity. When the lane is open, when the slot is open, you take the shot, right? But not every shot is the right shot. And that's kind of how I feel about this. Do I want to see Jessica Campbell stay in the NHL as a coach? Do I want to see Jessica Campbell as a head coach? Absolutely. Is she the right coach? Is she the best coach? Given all of the scenarios, and at least for what we know now, I don't think that this is the right move for the organization just yet. And I don't think it's the right move for Jessica Campbell just yet. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? It has to be more than vibes. And I say that with the utmost respect for Jessica Campbell, as well as the utmost respect for the role, and knowing that there's a little bit more. It's not her time to be a sous chef yet. Perfect the other areas of the kitchen, perfect the other stations. And yeah, when she's ready, it will be undeniable. That's how I feel. Just being able to see her work, um, to speak to her a few times. I think she's driven. I think that she's grown a lot, even from the time with Coachella Valley to now. I think the way that she speaks, she's more open about telling her story. Those are all good things. Again, because this is a job, it is a business, yes. And we heard from Chandler Stevenson, right? What he liked about Dan Bylsma is that Bylsma could lean into that these are people too. Jessica has ambitions, I'm sure. You know, she doesn't always like to, I've asked her a few times, she doesn't always like talking about them. And some things you want to keep close to the vest until you can fully process them for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not about lack of confidence in her growth potential. It's not about, you know, keeping her in her place, or, saying that this is only going to be for the publicity, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there is a part of that that I am also very weary of, I want to be cautious about. I would grow weary if, I mean, I've already a little bit, but I would grow weary if it was only like, oh, well, I just want this to be a conversation piece. I mean, that can't be the reason, Seattle. That can't be the reason. And if I'm Jessica, I don't accept that. But she knows. She knows. And when she's ready to put her name in the hat, if that's this season, hey, then I'm wrong. I'm a podcast host. I can be wrong. Absolutely. I don't think I'm wrong right now, but I could be. Don't think Jessica Campbell is the right pick for our next head coach. So who is? Well, we'll have to keep talking about that.